We are here live, and I'm going to pick a little bit, but then I'm going to talk a lot and talk about everything I've ever learned about improvising. So let's improvise a song. I like this old melody called Spinning Wheel. My dad used to play this. All right, spinning wheel. Okay, so when I first started playing, I often joke like, the first tune I ever learned was Old Joe Clark, and I played it for somebody, and I'd say that this is the first song I ever learned. But where it takes an hour to get through one tune because you're a beginner, and I remember riding in the car with my dad one day, and he just casually said, I don't know, we were listening to music or whatever, talking about music, and he said, a good musician will never play a song the same way twice. And he did not elaborate on that. What does that mean? It's written in the book, like, how do I not play it the same way twice? It's written like that, and I became aware of improvisation. And what that meant, we went to a jam session one time, and there was a guy there flat picking a guitar. I thought he was really good. We were driving home. I said, "Dad, that guy's pretty good picker." And he said, "He's all right." I heard him. I thought he was pretty good. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you could tell he just learned off a tab. His hands never make the chords." Oh, that's interesting. So, starting with playing, I was aware that people were improvising, and I was aware that there's at least some of that going on. Sometimes people play the song the same way every time, and sometimes they're putting something in it. So then you start thinking about, how do you do that? You get far enough along, and somebody said, well, I think there's these books about hot licks for bluegrass guitar. And so I started learning some hot licks for bluegrass guitar. And I remember kind of becoming a collector of licks. And I said, oh, look at this lick. And then I was a jammer. And so I was already playing, and so I would try to play a lick. I took a lesson from a guy one time, and he gave me a book. It was by Thomas Omsom, like Modern Method for Improvisation and Fiddle Tunes. Okay. Well, what that book taught was it taught you scales, both major and minor. And this was all on mandolin at the time. And then it taught you two patterns. One pattern sounded like this, and the other pattern sounded like this. So one of those is called a scale in thirds. Those are common patterns. A lot of bluegrass players play those patterns. And what the song did what that book did, it taught you a song. And then it said, hey, for this part of the song, just don't play the melody. Start on that note and play one of those patterns, and that'll sound pretty good. I said, oh. And it gave you a couple examples how to do that. So that was my improvising at first. And so everything I improvised sounded either like or. So that's what I tried. But it got me outside of playing the song, so it was pretty good. And then I would try silly things, like things I didn't even know how to do. I heard something on that Vassar Clements played, and I thought it was this. I don't know if it was, but I thought it was this. So I was like, I'm going to do that. That's easy. You just move your fingers like this. That's nonsense. That's not even a scale or anything. So, so maybe it would be like, you know, it's like, oh, that's interesting. But it gave me permission to try maybe something that was weird or didn't make any musical sense. I dropped my pick. It's down here. So I met. Let's see. I had two primary teachers when I was growing up. One is a local legend in Peoria named Bob Applegate. Bob Applegate led a band called Applegate and Company that played in Peoria for over 40 years. I had a good fortune to learn from Bob and to play with Bob quite a bit later on. And he was just a genius musician and a genius sound engineer, just a walking encyclopedia of knowledge. And Bob taught theory, and Dad signed me up for theory lessons. And so then Bob taught me what all the names of the notes and all the chords were, and made me memorize them. And so I, from a young age, 14 years old, I knew the names of the notes and all the chords. So I knew that G chord, it wasn't just a shape to me, it was GBD. And so somehow that starts to get into the improvising, knowing what notes are in the chords. You think, oh, maybe those are important. And they are, it turns out. But I remember even Bob, I remember almost, I can visualize what he played. Like, I think we were playing Blackberry Blossom or something, he assigned me, and I was learning Blackberry Blossom. And I played it pretty good, I guess, or something, and he said, you know, you could go ahead and improvise a little bit. And he played something. And I thought, no, I can't do that. And like, he was asking me to do something I couldn't do. Which he was, you know. And I was like, I couldn't do that. You know, actually, if I had just copied what his fingers did, because in my mind, I could still, right now, I could see what his fingers were doing. It was something like that. Now I know what it is. Then I wouldn't have known what that was. I had another teacher who was brilliant. There's a guy from, I think, the St. Louis area. His name was Cecil Tennant. He showed me a lot on mandolin and guitar. Brilliant teacher. And Cecil showed me what now I know are called caged chords. Cecil didn't know the names of the notes in every chord like Bob, but Cecil knew the back of his hand, like a guitar like the back of his hand. He knew every position on that guitar. And Cecil would tell me things like, say, here's your chord, okay? And he would tell me things like, okay, you can play any note in there, but make sure you come back to that. So that was my improvising for a while. It was kind of random. I remember jamming, and somebody said, what are you doing? And, you know, when they say it like that, I thought they were asking me to tell them what I was doing. And not saying, what they're really saying is, what are you doing, moron? I didn't know any better. He said, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm playing all the notes in this position, and I'm coming back to here, coming back to end. He said, yeah, I could see that's what you're doing. But that's all I knew how to do, because that's what I knew. And you know what? What happened was I became an improviser in the truest sense of exploring the fretboard and exploring a chord position for a long time. And, you know, eventually that becomes, I learned more about scales, and that becomes a proper scale. Or I learned, you know, a G run, and those notes become part of it, because those are the sounds. And all the time I'm learning this, whatever it is I'm learning, I'm listening to bluegrass. So now the sounds of Tony Rice, even though I'm not learning that many Tony Rice licks, the sounds of it are getting baked into my ears. The sounds, man, then we discovered David Greer. Woo! The Climbing the Walls album, Lone Soldier, woo! What is this? This is totally mind-blowing. It's as good as Tony, but it's different than Tony. How is that possible? And then You hear Dean McGraw? Dean McGraw. Go listen to the duo album by Peter Shrewsbury and Dean McGraw. You want to talk about an improviser. Dean McGraw, holy moly, is that guy amazing. You know, and then, you know, the knowledge we're around in the 90s, which is just who you meet and what they tell you, because there's no internet. And maybe something you get from the library, a book you get from the library. So I'm learning all this time. So then for a long time, what was the kind of improviser I was the kind of improviser who would respond to what I heard myself play. Because here's the order. I wasn't, first of all, I was like a lick player, okay? Let me try to put that lick in every song. That works. You could do that. And then I was maybe a pattern player. Okay, that works to a certain point, but you get tired of those patterns. And then I was an explorer, where I would take a chord position or a scale and just explore every possibility. I'm sure during that time I played a lot of weird stuff, but I always came back because that's what Cecil told me to do. I think that's what he told me to do. That's how I heard it. So then, when you're an explorer now, the next thing is you respond. I was responding to the sounds I was exploring. So I would play something, and all this, none of this is happening by itself, by the way. I think that's important. This is all happening in a jam session. Improvising by yourself is borderline insane. But this was happening in a jam session, or we didn't have backing tracks, but I would record one, like on a boombox. So I would play the rhythm part and go back and play the lead part over that. And so you're hearing what the notes you're playing sound like, and then you're adjusting. So with every note I play, I'd hear, what does that sound like with what's happening? And then I could decide the next note. And that was a really good training ground because it let me be an explorer, you know, just randomly going like this. And it let me be a listener to myself. What's this note? What did I just play? Maybe it started out random, but maybe I can make a decision with that. So yeah, here's a chord. Just play some kind of chord. I'm trying to make a decision on what to play after I play every note. So I'm trying to listen and then decide what to play. I think that's a really good way to improvise. And then at some point, I thought, okay, maybe I'd heard about George Benson, or maybe I heard about people that could sing lines. And I decided I would start becoming a singer. I probably would have been better off had I actually learned how to become a singer. But no. Always an instrumentalist here, right? It would be better if I'd learned how to sing good harmony or good lead or anything. No. I just like playing guitar. That's a surefire way to get fired from a band, by the way. But what I started doing was singing the things I played. I started singing scales. I started singing all the songs. Started singing stuff like that. Okay. And then I thought, well, maybe I could sing something and then learn to play what I sang. Okay, it's pretty close. Well, see, now I'm instead of responding to what I played, I'm trying to put the thoughts in ahead. Now, here's the problem with that. It works great, except that you can't do that on stage. because you got a mic right in front of you. They're going to hear it in the audience. So that worked pretty well, like to write a song. You know, if I wanted to write a melody, I might still do something like that. I mean, do dee do dee do da bo de be bo. That could be a song. Do dee do do be do da dee. Dee dee do da dee. You know, like that could work. That could work to write a song. You know, it's again like my goal was like, okay, what if I could harness this? If I could harness the music that's sitting in my mind. I remember I went to bed one night. You know, you ever had this? You go to bed and you hear music. I remember going to bed one night, growing up, and I remember laying down and closing my eyes, and for a second, it was Bela Fleck. It was some crazy, beautiful thing floating through my head. And I realized my brain was making music. And then I paid attention to it, and it went away. It just turned off. And I thought, oh, if I could harness that, I'd be pretty good. If I could figure out how to do what my brain is creating, you know. So the singing kind of became that. And then, you know, at some point, especially as a young person, a bluegrass musician will maybe get into jazz. You hear about jazz, and improvisation kind of comes from jazz in the modern sense, in the last 100 years or so. And so you start hearing about people. Oh, you should listen to Miles Davis. Or I think what happened. We had a guy. I was a senior. He was a freshman. This guy named Doug Stone. He's the chair of the jazz department at LSU University now. Brilliant person. Well, he was brilliant when he was 13 years old. He was brilliant. And he could tell I could play guitar and didn't know any jazz, but he's like, you should join the jazz band so we can jam. I was like, okay. And so I got the material for the jazz band, I worked it out over a weekend, and went and auditioned, and I made the jazz band. And I was a senior in high school, and then I started hanging out with Doug a little bit. And I remember a specific moment. You know, he's playing rhythm changes. You know, I've got rhythm, I've got music, and he's playing it on the saxophone. You know, he's just like riffing all through these. And at one point, I realized, I said, wait a second, you're playing something different over every chord. Now the chords are going this fast. And he just looked at me, he's 13 years old, he looks at me and says, yes, I'm outlining the changes. I was like, what outlining the changes? They change every beat. How does he do this? So now I know that's a thing. Well, that took another 10 years to get close to at half the speed. Okay. Now you learn about that. Oh boy. Now we're really in trouble. Okay. So, you know, I went to college for music. I did not go to college for bluegrass. I went to college on the French horn. And but I played guitar in the college jazz band and stuff a little bit. And you know, bluegrass gives you a lot of chops. So I could really make a guitar sound good, even electric guitar, and I could play bluegrass licks work pretty good on jazz now. You know, even if I play this, I can play a lot of bluegrass. You know. You know, there was a bluegrass lick. By the way, that'll give you away every time. If you want to be a fake jazz player, which I advise, don't do this. That's when they know you're a bluegrass guitar player. That's the secret now. Don't do that. Do that. Skip the pull off. Because it sort of sounds like jazz if you go. But if you go like this, they can tell you're a bluegrass musician. That's true now. Don't do that. Okay? So I remember, we would learn stuff, and that's when you learn about, they said Jamie Aebersold was important, and those books and stuff. And so you start learning, they say, well now, what we're learning now is the Dorian scale. And that's the 2 chord. And the Mixolydian scale. And that's the 5 chord. And the Ionian scale. And that's the 1 chord. I started looking at all those. I said, they're all the same scale. No. There's a Dorian. There's a Mixolydian. What? They're all the same. Because they are. So what in the world is that about? So at some point I was like, I'm just going to play 1 scale over all of it. Because that's what it was to me. Okay. I remember one time the college guy, bless his heart, really smart guy, brilliant musician, but playing something over the 5 chord. And he said, well, use the superlocrian there. I said, the what? I said, the superlocrian. What is the superlocrian? How am I supposed to, where is that in my book? How do I know what a superlocrian is? That doesn't make any sense to me. Superlocrian. So I kept that pretty simple. And at one point, I kind of figured out that how I kind of approach jazz, which I call myself, I play 2 styles of music now. Play whatever anybody tells me to play. I'll play a bunch of styles of music. But I really like bluegrass, and I really like jazz, but I can't call myself a jazz musician because there's people that really study this stuff that know it way better than me that would call themselves a jazz musician. So I play bluegrass and fake jazz. And if you say you play fake jazz, I think that justifies, you already know I don't play real jazz. So that means you can't judge my jazz because it's already fake. I already know it's fake, but I like it. I like my fake jazz. Okay, so, yeah, man. Where am I at? So what could be next? So, well, I figured out I wanted to learn how to improvise over some jazz, and they said, well, you have to play the changes. Again, I'm still dealing with, what that 13-year-old told me a long time ago. You gotta. I'm outlining every chord. Okay. Well, how do I do that? So, one thing I figured out is that I could stay in one key as long as possible. I was pretty good. And then there would be some chords that weren't in the key, and I could do something different for those. And I then make kind of hit the notes in the chord. And I would be doing pretty good, so I would take All of Me or something like this. Do 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 do. And as long as the chord was in the key of C, I could just riff over C. This is how I figured I could do it. Well, C chord's in the key of C. What do we got? C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor. Nobody cares about that. But now, so I got C, so I could play anything over C. And that would work pretty good. And then I get to the E7, I'd say, that's not in the key of C. So I better play just the notes in the E7 chord. So, and I get to the A7, say A7's that's not supposed to be A7, so I better just play the notes in the A7 chord. Now I get to the D minor, I say, D minor. D minor, I'm back to my home base. I'm back because D minor's in the key of C, so I can go back to a C scale. So maybe it would be something like this. Now, what is it? E again, so I better know what the chord is. Now A minor, I'm back in the key of C. Then D, I'm not in the key. D7, so I better play D7 notes. Now G7, I'm back in the key of C. Now I got a little But I would look at my chart and I would write in like, I would just like literally write on the chart, be like, okay, C scale here. Okay, do a little E7 thing here, little A7 thing here. Okay, now I'm back to the C scale. I'd write what I was going to play over the chords of the song. And I learned how I could get through a song that way, and it would sound like fake jazz. That's my style now, fake jazz. Well, then I got into this Hal Galper thing. Hal Galper, I better look at my time, make sure I know what time it is. I got into this Hal Galper thing. Well, these videos were going around. I love YouTube. It's so fun. I love watching all these YouTube videos. I've learned so much in the last 20 years off of YouTube since it came out. Well, Hal Galper had this thing called the illusion of the instrument. He said, that's not the instrument. He said, you're the instrument. And he had this girl play a 2-5-1 lick, and she plays it, and it's like, you know. And he said, okay, now think the lick and shout it in your brain. And she played that lick, and man, it sounded good. And I went, holy moly. And he had these examples about how if the music is in your brain, they said, well, that's what I've been wanting to get. There's music out of my brain. So I went down this road where I was staring at the ceiling like Julian Lage, not sounding like Julian Lage, but staring at the ceiling like Julian Lage, harnessing music directly out of my brain and learning how to play it. And I came up with some pretty fun stuff. So here I'm just trying to imagine, okay? So let me stare at the ceiling and see if I can go inside my brain and play some music. So I'm gonna stare more at the ceiling, you know. Well, that was fun to me to try to do that, because I was like, well, that gives me a lot of freedom. And it really tuned me into the musician inside. But what I found is that I could come up with really fun stuff. I really liked what I came up with. But I found that I would kind of be mentally spent and stressed out. Like, I was just like, way too much concern about what every note sounded like. And it is like, well, the fun, a lot of the fun was gone. So I was like, okay, I came up with something cool, but I'm not having fun playing. Okay. And then I started studying a few years ago. I would see these videos by the Barry Harris guy, whose name is Barry Harris, by the way. And I really liked his personality and the way he would talk to the students and stuff. All these like, Amsterdam students and stuff, and just kind of like this mixture of disappointment and love at the same time. It's like, all right, you got to do this, you know, and helping these people. And then I just discovered, really it was after Barry passed, I discovered Chris Park's wonderful channel. Thank you, Chris. I've learned so much from you. And it's a beautiful channel called Things I Learned from Barry Harris, where he teaches what he remembers as Barry Harris's system, and outlines it in a really logical way. It's a little hard to follow because it took me, all this stuff takes years. It took me years to start to understand some of the things that I heard Chris say in the first video I heard him. I didn't understand it for 4 more years, you know, but that's how this goes sometimes. So, but I started getting into that system. And then I started thinking about how that could be applied to bluegrass. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm working on right now. Here's some of the things that Barry Harris teaches that I found really interesting. He teaches a scale stops at 7. That's an interesting thing. And what that does, what that does is puts every chord tone on the beat. Well, that's an interesting thing, and I kind of like that. So I started messing with that, and then I started coming up with ways to think about scales. I'll tell you another big influence. The guy I played with for years, his name is Solly Burton. Solly Burton, y'all don't even know how good Solly is. Y'all don't even know how good Solly Burton is on a mandolin and a guitar, but a mandolin. And he was trained somehow as a child to never miss a chord change. Ever. And since he's 17 years old, he leads into every chord. He leads out of every chord in a beautifully perfect way. He's a beautifully perfect musician. And I just really appreciate him and what I learned from him. Just watching him, just playing with him. And seeing how he thinks. And so I've been on this study for a long time now. Trying to learn how to become an improviser and getting better at it. And all this time, I guess I've just tried a bunch of stuff. The new thing that I have is basically I've tried to adapt Barry Harris things for bluegrass. It's too much to say it's Barry Harris bluegrass because I feel like it's bluegrass. But I've noticed certain things in the playing of certain people. Doc Watson, Billy Strings, who's brought Doc back to the fore, and Tony even. Tony's got some of these things where I've started to notice patterns, and then I'm trying to figure out, first of all, I had to learn it, and now I'm trying to figure out how to teach it. And let me show you the mother lick. This is the mother lick right here. It's a Doc Watson lick. It's from Beaumont Rag. This lick. That little lick, that sneaky little lick Doc Watson played. Because I thought, why does he do this? Why does he do that? Why doesn't he do this? Doesn't that make more sense? But he doesn't. He goes. And that gave me a clue. That gave me a clue. And I figured out some things that he was doing, what I thought he was doing, and how I could extrapolate that to something further. And I've started to come up with this system that I've been practicing for about 4 years now, and that I'm getting ready to be able to teach. I'm starting to just drip it out there to a few students. It's not for everybody. I don't have anything. I don't have like a system to sell today. I don't have it all. I can't explain it all today. But I want to play some licks that are out of this system. You tell me what you think, okay? Let's see, I'll play bluegrass licks and fake jazz licks. Those are my favorite styles, bluegrass licks. Okay, here's a bluegrass lick out of this system. Okay, sounds like a bluegrass lick. How about... a minor lick? How about this? That's a beautiful minor lick. Maybe add some blues. But there's ways to explain this that I'm going to start teaching. And I gotta have to lay it out right. And I know I'm not trying to be cagey, but I'm treating it a little bit precious. Why? Because when you put something out there, people come out and they hate on it. They say, well, that's not how it's done. That's not how Bill does it. That's not how I've heard it done. Because, man, what does the internet do? It funnels everybody to one thing and say everybody's going to be caged. You got to learn that cage system. That's cool. caged is cool, right? You got to learn this way because this is the way. So this ain't gonna be for everybody, but it's for me. I really enjoy it. I might find something later that I like better, but I really like this right now. So anyway, I'm gonna pick a little bit more. I'll try to put some of these fancy licks in there, and we'll call it a day. Let's see. What is this gonna be? Done the last chord better. Guys, thanks a lot.